Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight. Traffic in the Cottonwood Canyons kept growing in recent years. During ski season, a line of cars constantly and slowly makes its way up to the resorts. UDOT worked for years on the issue, and last week they released two potential plans to relieve traffic in Little Cottonwood Canyon. One plan would expand the road and add a dedicated bus lane. The other would build a gondola from the bottom up. And tonight, we will dive into the two plans. Kicking off our conversation live via Zoom is Josh Van Jura with UDOT, the project manager of the Little Cottonwood Environmental Impact Study. Josh, thank you so much for joining our discussion tonight. How long has the planning process been for this new transportation project been taking place?
The EIS started in the spring of 2018, and honestly, the first thing we did was to review all the studies that have taken place over the past 30 years or so in order to build on this information. So we've been studying this for quite a while now, as we really want to make sure that the analysis is both correct and complete, because really this is too important to get wrong.
Wow, it just shows how much work it takes to really dive into this and how complex the proposals are. UDOT announced the final two plans last week, whittled down from 124 proposals. So what were some of the deciding factors in the elimination process?
So again, UDOT always does transportation planning on a regional basis. And then when you get down to the project level, you move to a defined study area, and that's what we're doing for this EIS. So to identify the preferred alternative, UDOT really considered an alternative's ability to meet the project's purpose and need, which is to improve the mobility, reliability, and safety on SR 210 from Fort Union up through Alta, and all the associated resource impacts of those five alternatives. So water quality, air quality, environmental justice, and really roughly 20 other resources were analyzed in getting down to the two that were announced.
Wow, so many factors to take into play. Now, we'd like to learn more about each of those final two plans. So first, can you tell us about the gondola option? What would it look like? What's the travel time? How long will it take to complete? And how much would it cost to build?
Absolutely. So UDOT selected Gondola Alternative B, which is the one with the base station from Caille off of North Little Cottonwood Road, as this was the alternative that meets the project purpose of improving reliability the best. And that's because it operates independently of the SR 210 roadway, and it avoids delays related to snow removal, avalanche mitigation, traffic, incidents, and accidents. So quick overview, in this alternative, there's two mobility hubs, one at the gravel pit and another at 94 South and Highland. And there's also a parking structure at the Gondola base station. And it would take 55 or 59 minutes to travel up to Alta, depending on where you parked. And a cabin would arrive roughly every 2 minutes. Cost-wise, the gondola does have an initial cost of $592 million and a winter operations and maintenance cost of $7.6 million. And we recognize that the gondola does have the highest visual impacts, but it does have lower impacts to the watershed, wildlife, and the climbing boulders than the other alternatives. And that's really because the only ground disturbing activity would be at the tower locations themselves, rather than widening the roadway shoulders for the entire length of the canyon.
Now let's get to the road expansion. What would that option look like as far as travel time, completion time, and how much is expected to cost?
Sure. So the enhanced bus service and peak period shoulder lane alternative was selected because this provides the best overall mobility of the five alternatives. And that's because it has the lowest seat time for a transit user. And this is really because the shoulder running bus would remove those passenger vehicles from the general purpose lanes, moving them to the bus, and actually allow buses to pass slower moving traffic in those general purpose lanes. So under this option, a transit user seat time would be approximately 36 minutes. And this is roughly 19 minutes faster than the travel time projected with the gondola. And a bus would depart each of those same two mobility hubs every 5 minutes in the peak period with direct service to each resort. So there'd be no bus stops along Wasatch, nor at trailheads. And the Alta bus would not stop at Snowbird, and the Snowbird bus wouldn't continue up to Alta. The PPSL alternative, capital cost wise, $510 million, and a winter operations and maintenance cost of $11 million per year. So a couple of considerations with this. These wider shoulders would increase safety for cyclists and pedestrians that I think we all see in the canyon and use it heavily. But I want to note that it's important to recognize that the travel times that I just said, that 36-minute travel time, is calculated based on dry pavement. And when it's snowing, these travel times are likely to go up, and the buses are prone to delays associated with slide-offs and crashes. And while there'll be more area to maneuver around these incidents than there is today, delays are still possible with the peak period shoulder lanes.
Thank you for that, Josh. We have to wrap it real quick. Can you tell us how and when the final decision will be made?
So we are currently in a 45-day comment period. After that comment period, UDOT will review and respond to all those comments and will revise the draft EIS as necessary. And then the final EIS will identify a single preferred alternative that best meets that project purpose and need. And we hope to release that final EIS in the winter of 21-22, or this coming winter.
All right, you've heard it here. If you want to chime in, you have 4 days to do it. You've been hearing from Josh Van Jura with UDOT, the project manager of the Little Cottonwood Environmental Impact Study. And Josh, thanks for being here tonight to break down these plans for us. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely, thank you.
We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on gondola or buses, traffic in Little Cottonwood Canyon. Now we'll discuss the arguments for each plan, and first up, the gondola. Up next, live via Zoom, is Dave Fields, President and General Manager for Snowbird. Dave, pleasure having you here. For those that don't normally travel up Little Cottonwood Canyon or have never dealt with the traffic issues up there, tell us about why there is a need for a plan to ease the congestion there.
Well, for as long as people have been skiing up Little Cottonwood Canyon, they have been struggling with how to get people up and down in a safe way. And as we see population grow in the Wasatch Front, we have more and more people coming up the canyons to recreate. And the problems have not changed. We have a steep canyon that's the most avalanche-prone highway in North America. And on a busy Saturday, there's many as 7,000 cars in the canyon. And what's happening is the system is coming apart and people are stuck in the canyon. They're stuck in their cars. They're stuck in buses because we have avalanches and we also get 500 inches of snow. And so the traction falls apart and people slide off the road. And as soon as one car slides off the road, the whole flow of traffic in the canyon comes to a stop and people end up sitting in their cars for hours at a time.
That is so fascinating. I had no idea that Little Cottonwood Canyon was the most avalanche-prone highway in North America. So thank you for educating us on that tonight. What process did Snowbird go through that led your company to lean towards the gondola option?
Well, we've been part of the UDOT process, but we've been studying this for a long, long time. Decades, we've been trying to figure out how to make it so that our customers and our employees can come up and down the canyon in a safe, clean, efficient manner. And what we have come to the conclusion is that vehicles are not the answer. We do not believe it's right to have 7,000 cars in the canyon. We think there's a better way. The bus technology right now is not clean. It's a dirty diesel bus going up and down the canyon. And when they get stuck, everybody on it, like earlier in your newscast in Zion National Park, when there was a flash flood and a rock slide, that's just like how it goes in Little Cottonwood Canyon. We get an avalanche across the road or somebody gets stuck and the bus is stuck and everything comes to a halt. So that's what pointed us toward gondola. Gondola is an efficient way where you can move people up and down the canyon. The gondola technology has improved a lot in the last few years, and you can now move 3,000 to 4,000 people an hour. The the bottom of the canyon up to the resorts and back down. And that's where most of the traffic is headed, is to the resorts. And it has the lowest emissions, and it doesn't require adding 2 more lanes of pavement to the highway and a bunch of snow sheds. We believe a gondola is the cleanest, most cost-effective, longest-lasting solution out there. And it doesn't harm the environment. It doesn't harm the water. It doesn't have to have a huge impact on the mountainside like you will when you put in 4 lanes and snow sheds for buses.
Dave, I'm so curious. UDOT started with 124 proposals. Was this gondola option the top or the favorite for Snowbird, or is it just the favorite out of the remaining 2?
This gondola solution for me and for all of us at Snowbird who work in the canyon every day, once there was an option to have a parking structure at the Caille base station, it made sense, because the original gondola idea was at the mouth of the canyon, didn't have parking, and you do need some parking. You don't need a ton. You don't need to replace parking stalls 1 for 1, but you need some. And as soon as that happened, it crystallized for us that this was the best option for getting people safely and efficiently up the canyon. It would be an absolutely beautiful view riding up that canyon in a gondola, looking at the mountainside. And there would be no stress. You're not stuck in your car wondering when you're going to get up and ski the powder, or even worse, when you're going to get home when you're caught in the red snake.
Dave, we have about 30 seconds left, just enough time for final thoughts. What would you like to leave our viewers with tonight?
Well, I think it's really important that people make their voice heard, participate in the public comment period that goes through August 9th, and let people know that you don't support vehicles and buses and dirty modes of transportation. The Europeans figured this out a long time ago. It's easy to get around the mountains in a cable car that can go over traffic jams, avalanches, and other obstructions.
You've been hearing from Dave Fields, President and General Manager for Snowbird. And Dave, thank you for being a part of our conversation. We appreciate your time tonight. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on gondola or buses, traffic in Little Cottonwood Canyon. We just heard the case for the gondola plan, and now we will talk about the expanded bus lane plan. Rounding out our conversation tonight live via Zoom is Caille Fisher, the Executive Director for Save Our Canyons. Caille, thank you so much for being here tonight and welcome to the show. What process did Save Our Canyons go through that led your group to lean towards the bus option in UDOT's final 2 proposals?
Well, Save Our Canyons has been engaged in canyon issues for almost 50 years now as an organization. We actually formed in response to Snowbird opening back in 1972. So we've been tracking these issues and canyon visitation, and really the inability for people to grapple with some of the development that will follow some of these higher capacity proposals, to grapple with the growth. And, you know, as more people come into these canyons, we have to build more stuff in there, which takes away from the wildness and beauty of the Wasatch that is the mission of our organization to protect. So utilizing existing infrastructure like the roads and getting more people and increasing vehicular capacity on the roadways, really supporting the bus is the best way to do that and get more people up into the canyon more efficiently without building more and cluttering nature up in Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Now, Caille, before we dive a little bit more into why the bus plan appeals to your group, I'd like to know, UDOT started with 142 proposals, and they whittled those down to the final 2. To you, was the bus expansion plan like your top or your favorite, or is it only the top of the final 2 proposals?
No, and I would say that the bus option that they've selected is not even our preferred option. You know, we would like to see a bus system that better penetrates into the Salt Lake Valley with more park and ride options well away from the canyons, getting people out of their vehicles and onto electric buses closer to their homes. without having to add congestion to the busy mouths of these canyons, and providing direct transit service closer to people's homes and to visitors' hotels.
Thank you for sharing that. So unfortunately, we're left with two options here, the gondola and the bus lane expansion plan. So give me your pros and cons for each one. We knew you're leaning towards the bus plan. Tell me what goes through your head when you're weighing those final two options.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, the road is already there. We don't even believe UDOT showed, and they eliminated one of the alternatives, but you don't even have to expand the road. You can service just the same amount of people as they're serving with this expanded lane, which has much more significant impact. So that, being efficient and not having to build more is kind of a no-brainer for protecting the environment. The visual qualities aren't there. You don't have 200 to 300 foot towers, 20 of them up and down the canyons. 70% of the users are dispersed users in this canyon. This is really coming at the expense of what people value about these canyons, particularly for the gondola. But the bus, it's there. It can service all the trailheads. It can stop before Snowbird and Alta, whereas really the gondola project just serves 2 ski areas and a business at the bottom that is tied to it.
Now, we asked Dave this question in the last segment, so I'd like to hear from you as well. What are your thoughts about the concept that there's a need for a plan to ease the congestion in Little Cottonwood Canyon?
I think that there's a need to reduce the congestion of all the Wasatch Canyons, and to spend, over $500 million on one canyon, really at the expense of other canyons, seems fiscally irresponsible to us. That said, I think you could come up with a bus system, as I mentioned earlier, with park and rides around the valley. But UDOT said that was outside the scope. How serving more canyons and getting more people onto transit and out of their vehicles is outside the scope for dealing with the issues that we're dealing with in the Wasatch is kind of beyond us, I guess. But that's what the agency has decided, and we're hoping that the public can help right the conversation.
Now, Caille, you talked about this a little bit earlier in this segment, but is there anything more you want to say about concerns about the environmental impact with more building and construction in the canyon?
Yeah, Snowbird, for example, it is a large resort in a very sensitive watershed canyon. It's only about 1/3 of the way built. So as you get 3,000 to 4,000 more people per hour going to these resorts, you can start to see more congestion, longer lift lines, more pressures to expand ski resorts, and certainly, more condominiums, developments, and lavish lodges in these Cottonwood Canyons, which we don't think is the reason why people are going up there. These are our watersheds, and people are trying to get away from the busy urban environment and try and be near wildflowers and wildlife, and get some fresh air in the mix.
Caille, we have about 30 seconds left. Will you and your organization be disappointed if in the end UDOT does not select the bus plan and goes with the gondola?
I think we will not only be disappointed, we'll be terrified for the future and the fate of the Wasatch Mountains, because this is the camel's nose under the tent for a massive resort interconnect, and it will be followed with a lot more development that will take away from the wildness and beauty of our Wasatch Canyons.
All right, thank you so much. You've been hearing from Caille Fisher, Executive Director for Save Our Canyons. Caille, thanks for your participation in our discussion. We enjoyed hearing from you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And don't forget, we'd love to hear from you about the show. We invite you to join our Facebook group by going to facebook.com/groups/ABC4InFocus, or you can send us an email, infocus@abc4.com.